Hi everyone, I am Mark Faiers. I'm the DevOps practice lead at RiverSafe, and I'm here with my colleague Patrick. And we're going to be talking about the 2024 State of DevOps report that was released last week. So Pat, do you want to just give a quick introduction to yourself?
Yeah, I'm Patrick Morris. I'm a principal DevOps engineer at RiverSafe. And yeah, we're going to do a little deep dive into the latest DORA 2024 report.
I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone who's watching this that the first thing that they focused on was AI. That was kind of probably the biggest topic in the report and
Yeah.
right at the start of the report. As I said, I don't think that will come as any surprise, but I think it was they had an interesting take on AI overall, I thought, and very sort of balanced in that um, they weren't coming at it from the point of view of just saying, AI is just hype.
Mhm.
They tried to give a really balanced view of saying, these are the benefits that we're seeing of AI. They talked about benefits to developer productivity, benefits to flow, even actually, the one I found most interesting was the benefit to job satisfaction
Mhm.
of developers. But then they kind of contrasted that by saying that there were negative aspects of introducing AI into developers' workflows as well.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just trying to find a stat, whether we're talking about if you increase your AI adoption by 25%, you'll find that there's a reduction in delivery stability by 7.2%, right? And delivery throughput by 1.5%. So that was quite shocking to kind of learn that.
Absolutely.
Because I think it's easy to make an assumption and say that AI is going to actually help with those two stats, right? But the data has come back and given very kind of mixed results, which is very interesting. Um, so yeah, maybe we can kind of talk a little bit more about that in terms of why you think maybe that is.
So
Um,
I think so. Obviously, when you and it was surprising to me as well. I think as well because when you think about um, when you think about AI, you think about improved productivity. You know, the classic case of AI in development of it's going to help you write your code.
mhm.
Um, but perhaps that indicates there's a bit too much trust in the output of the AI and that are developers are not checking the code that's being written enough, and they're just trusting what the AI has written is going to be correct and performant. And when that code maybe makes it into production, that's causing issues later down the line.
Yeah, that's interesting that you touched on trust, right? So on their research paper, it said that 39% of the respondents reported little to no trust in AI generated code. That's a fairly big number, right? Um,
It's quite high, yeah.
which is, I guess, is that expected? I think it is, right? Because it's still very early days in terms of, AI hasn't really been around in kind of full use for very long, right? But I know from experience, some of the code that gets kind of spat out by some of these AI systems is not great.
Yeah.
A lot of it is usable, but you do need to spend quite a bit of time trying to make it work, right? Which is probably why that's causing the mistrust in the AI code that's being generated. Um,
100%. And
and
I,
yeah.
I think it just shows the need for you to have you know good continuous integration. So you need to have automation where you're looking at code quality, code smells, code
Mhm.
testing, all of the stuff that's going to guarantee you quality, which is going to translate into stability when that code is being run in production.
I totally agree. Yeah, that makes sense. But the bit that didn't quite sort of add up in my head, it said that 75% or 3 out of 4 developers are currently using AI for writing code, right? Which is obviously the code in the software development life cycle is a very kind of beginning of that cycle, right? And developers normally want to spend most of their time writing code, right? They don't want to be dealing with all the admin and all the other stuff that comes with it, which is quite strange. To me, it felt contradictory, right? So if you're a developer, you want to be writing code, which is odd that the stat is saying that they're relying or they're using AI to write code, right? Which is a bit odd. It doesn't quite add up in my head. What do you think?
And I think that I agree, and I think that ties in with something else I said in the report, is that even though that organizations and developers are seeing productivity benefits from AI, I think there was a decrease in the time that developers were reporting they were spending time doing valuable work. So I think you're right. It's the AI is doing the tasks that actually developers want to do. Whereas, if in an ideal world, you would have maybe an AI that went and did all of your meetings for you, and then you could just sit there and write code. But that's obviously a much more complex task, I think, and that's perhaps why we're seeing that. Is my feeling.
Indeed, yeah. There was another really interesting point that came up in an interview with what's his name? He's like the lead kind of DORA person, Nathan Harvey, the DORA lead at Google Cloud, and he was talking about the code, or some German university found that the code that's generated by AI tends to be highly sort of executable, but it's less understandable and maintainable for human coders, right? So I think that's a really interesting point, because if people are using AI to write code, then when people are raising PRs and trying to get their code into production, those batches of code are going to be much bigger, right? And that is probably having that impact on stability in terms of, or maybe even throughput, right? In terms of, reviewing that code, approving that code, and all of that stuff that leads to code ended up in prod. So, yeah, I don't know what to make of that. I think
you're 100% right there in that, there's a danger that if you've got something that can just spit out 100 lines of code almost instantly, then there is a big temptation to just get it to write a lot of code for you, and then you commit that, and you end up with those those larger batch sizes that obviously DevOps advises against. And I think they call it out to an extent in the report as well.
Yeah, they do actually towards the end, at the end of the report. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's one of their key kind of capabilities, right? Which I think has been around for quite a long time, working in small batches. Hopefully, that concept doesn't go out the window, given the proliferation of AI. I guess it's easy to kind of overlook those fundamentals, when you're dealing with new tech and stuff, right? So we got to err on the side of caution, I think, with AI, in my opinion.
100%. And I think the last point on AI, because I think we should probably move on, and not be guilty of what everyone else is doing at this point, of just talking about AI, because there were other things in the report. But I thought,
indeed.
I think one of my takeaways was that there was a lot of AI FOMO. So what I kind of took away was that organizations seem to be using AI, but they don't exactly know why they're using AI. So they want to use AI so that they can say that they're using AI. They're afraid of getting left behind, but actually, where AI can be really useful is looking at the specific task and where it can add value in that specific task or a specific process. And that's perhaps something that organizations are not doing to the extent they should be.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get some stats. I can't remember if they had any on the report around, how much big tech are investing in the AI, right? I mean, it's insane that the amount of money they're pumping into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm sure at some point, given that it's early days, we'll see the value add. I'm sure DORA will probably go into much more detail in next year's report. Once,
I'm expecting more AI again next year. Yeah, definitely.
absolutely.
The next section of the report was on platform engineering, which
Yes.
is another topic that seems to be sort of on everyone's lips at the moment. What were your thoughts on the insights in that
Yeah,
section?
I've downloaded DORA's kind of key insight summary page that's got all the stats on there. It's quite nice. So that one of their key stats on there says 89% of respondents are using an internal developer platform. That's a very large percentage, right, of teams who are embracing platform engineering as a way of improving the way they deliver software into production. I would have thought that that figure will be a lot smaller, but clearly the data is telling us otherwise. But yeah, so some interesting stuff around platform engineering. So I guess the most notable is the decrease in throughput. So I'm not sure if you noticed, in last year's report they talked about the DORA metrics. So you've got the velocity metrics, i.e. change deployment and frequency and whatever, and then the stability metrics, right? But now they're calling it throughput and stability. So there's a slight subtle kind of change there. But they reckon that platform engineering has an 8% decrease in throughput among those using the platform compared to those who don't. And I'm guessing that's probably because all the handoffs that you'd expect in an IDP platform, right? So you've got so many systems that are being sort of put together, right? And when something goes wrong, it's going to take a lot longer, I guess, to fix and get that pipeline moving again, right? So that probably explains that reduction. And they do talk about a 5% improvement in productivity when users of the platform are able to complete their tasks without involving an enabling team, right? So interesting. I think most teams are obviously aiming for sort of being independent, right? Not having to depend on other teams, right? But I think that's quite difficult to achieve unless your system is designed in a very streamlined way, right? I guess.
100%. And I think that stat on
Mhm.
throughput, I think it makes sense in the context of what you've talked about there, where a lot of organizations now will have like a central platform team,
Mhm.
and then they will create features within the platform that are then consumed by the development teams. And you've obviously got there, a handoff or at least a separation between development teams and platform teams.
Mhm.
Um, and that is potentially what's causing that throughput issue. If developers can't get their changes through the platform
Mhm.
in an optimal way, or the way
Mhm.
that the platform's designed, then that's obviously going to slow things down compared to an approach where development teams, are building their own pipelines to production and things like that. And then if there is a problem, they have the ability to fix the problem themselves rather
Mhm.
than relying on an external team to help them fix that. So that to me kind of explains the throughput or slight throughput issue. It's not massive, but it's potentially a slight issue.
Yeah, I guess not having an IDP solution, obviously that figure is probably going to be even worse, I guess, right? Because then you've got all this disparate systems, and you have to join them all up, right? And try and get your changes through all of those steps. Um, but yeah, platform engineering. So what did they talk about? So they talked about how it improves individual and team productivity, but like we talked about, it can hinder throughput and stability. What else did they talk about? Um,
I think stability as well. They talked about it. It had a negative impact on stability as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
What
I'm just gonna
what
grab the some stats on that. If you feel free, yeah, feel free to carry on talking on that.
I was just going to ask for sort of your take on what might be causing that change in stability in a
I
negative
think
way.
I think it's difficult to say really because it's all kind of context driven, but um yeah, what is causing the stability issues with because I would have thought having an IDP solution that's designed, with your end user in mind, i.e. your developers in this case, right? Um, if that was done properly and users are able to, make a code change, push it up, and then the system automatically identifies what's changed and pushes it out, I can't see why stability would be impacted by having an IDP.
I guess potentially
Um,
comes down to the quality of the platform.
yeah,
If what's being provided by the platform is low quality, then
that is
um,
true.
low quality is gonna come out. So
Yeah.
that's one possible cause, I think. But yeah, it's there was a lot in the report that seemed sort of counterintuitive, I guess,
Hmm.
um, around AI and around platform engineering. Of it had both of them had positive effects, but both of them also had negative impacts that we've discussed a bit. Um, and I think for me, the overarching theme of the entire report, and this is probably not a lot different from last year's report, is that the key thing is not technology at all, but
Hmm.
being user centric in how you use technology and um, how you develop features and how you do software engineering and how you do DevOps. Um, because I think what really came out for me is that AI can be positive, and platform engineering and IDPs can have a positive impact, but you need to be user centric in the way that you use them. You need to AI tools that you use and the way that you use them needs to be designed to help developers if they're the users of AI, and platforms need to be user centric. So you need to build the features that users want and need. Because I think in both of the cases of AI and platform engineering, there was a talk of increased burnout
Hmm.
and a negative impact perhaps on job satisfaction. And that to me must be derived from um, those things being done in not a user-centric way, and therefore having a negative impact on the day-to-day lives of the developers.
I totally agree, and you just reminded me of a pretty crazy stat that they published, I think, in last year's report, where they talked about if you focus on your end user, you could potentially benefit from a 40% increase in organizational performance. Do you remember that? Which is that was
Vaguely,
like,
yes.
whoa, bloody hell, 40%.
Uh,
And it turns out that your the end user really does matter, right? At the end of the day, everything we do as developers and engineers is you really have to think about your end user, right? Otherwise otherwise you're developing for the sake of developing, right? And potentially shipping out features that aren't going to get used by people, right? So it's really important that you understand your user and develop with them in mind at all times. But kind of going back to platform engineering, I've just pulled up the kind of summary of the report on Google, and I'll quickly talk about the four kind of key findings on platform engineering, if that's okay. Um, and this is where I think some of the stuff that they publish is or feels quite obvious, right? But obviously, like I said, they are data led. So the first point is around increased developer productivity, right? So that's a given, right? If you've got platform engineering in place, you're going to increase your developer productivity, right? Especially if you've got an IDP platform and it's helping your users to ship out software in an automated fashion. The other point they talked about was how there's a high prevalence in larger firms, right? But that's expected, right? A small organization isn't going to invest in platform engineering, right, or developing an IDP solution. It's mostly big tech companies and other industries that are going to pump money into developing, having a dedicated platform engineering team, right? The other one, I guess, is a little bit more difficult to predict, but they did talk about how platform engineering can have a potential performance dip, and they have a little graph where they sort of show how in the first year, you sort of get really good gains, but then there's a bit of a lull for the next sort of 1 to 2 years, and then it sort of picks up again, which is an interesting kind of observation there. And I think, like with anything, it when you onboard a new product, it takes time for it to settle, for people to sort of onboard to it, start using it, start becoming familiar with it, right? Before you start to sort of see that take off again. So that was an interesting observation there that they've made. And then the last point, which I sort of dovetails nicely with what you were saying, Mark, is around the need for user-centeredness, right, and developer independence. So platform engineering should always prioritize user-centered design and a product-oriented approach, which makes sense, right? If you don't do that, then your IDP solution or whatever it's just not going to get used properly and deliver the value that you want out of it. So yeah, some interesting findings there.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. I think echo that. Some really interesting, very nuanced stats and findings in the stuff on platform engineering.